Welcome to the Spirit Spa, an online sanctuary dedicated to supporting you if you're in the early stages of recovering from a nervous breakdown, so that you can identify why the breakdown has happened to you and work out your next natural steps towards recovery. Today's message from the wilderness is going to be a story that I've written for you to support you in these very, very early stages. And I'm choosing to post this video on February the 1st because in the pagan calendar and also the Christian calendar, February the 1st is Bridget's Day, or St. Bridget's Day. I'm not a Christian or a pagan, but I do have an affinity with Bridget. And this is because she is the patron saint, or the pagan goddess, of healing, the hearth and storytelling. She also represents the first day of spring. And I just think that when we're in those early stages of recovering from a nervous breakdown, to kind of have the knowledge that spring is coming when you're in the darkest of places is always, such a helpful thing to be able to kind of cling on to, if you like. And what I really love about the fact that I'm recording it for you to post on February the 1st is that I'm sitting in a forest where we've had really, really, really heavy ice and a little bit of snow overnight. So I'm sitting on a forest floor where the leaves are covered in ice, and you can actually hear ice melting and falling from the treetops. So it's really signifying kind of end of winter and the coming of spring. And in terms of your breakdown, taking one step forward towards the darkness ending and you entering into a lighter phase of your recovery. So the Truth Whisperer story, I'm recording it in two ways. One is this version, which is for you if you're a woman, and if you're a man, I've written a male version of the story, which will be in the comments box, in the discussion box below, so you'll find the link there. Before I tell you the story, I just also want to ask you to keep tuned at the end, because I have a exciting new development in terms of supporting you if you're a regular viewer. As you know, I normally invite you to email me to ask me any questions that you would like me to answer in a video, and you're still very welcome to do that, but I also have an exciting new development, so please stay tuned at the end to hear about that. So I have the story written out, so you will see me just kind of referring to it as I read to you. But please, I want you to imagine now that you're in the woods, you're gathered around a small fire, and you're about to listen to this story called The Truth Whisperer. Once upon a time, a broken woman lay stricken with a terrifying illness. Life, it seemed, had fallen out of her. Her frail body was present, yet her spirit was not. Distraught, her loved ones attempted every imaginable cure. Tinctures, broths, and poultices filled with the finest herbs. The world's finest medicine people were gathered, yet even they were unable to determine what had caused her malady or how best to cure her. If the finest physicians in the world couldn't find a cure, who could? Asta, the woman's young daughter, rarely left her mother's side. Each morning she would open the window drapes, then gently wash her mother's face and brush her hair. Each evening she would tuck the bed covers under her mother's chin, settling her for the night. In between times, they would sit in silence, one dead to sleep, the other left to ponder on this strange sight of her inert mother. Try as she might, Asta could think of nothing that might help. One day, glancing idly through the chamber window to the pine forest that grew beyond the garden wall, Asta spied a shadowy movement amongst the trees. She knew instinctively by its size and shape that this was no normal forest creature. It was too small and too slim. Was the misty rain falling today playing tricks with her vision? Asta concentrated on the dense copse of trees, determined not to miss another movement, for she had a good idea who belonged to this shadow. Selku, the woman of the woods. Everyone in the region knew of her, yet few had seen her. To the young folk like Asta, Selku was a mystery. Her grandparents and other village elders recalled times long ago when Selku would come to the market to sell foraged mushrooms and berries. These days, preferring to keep to herself in her home deep in the forest, she was rarely seen. Often, the only sign of her existence were the wispy plumes of smoke that rose above the trees from her fire. Today was the first time Asta had come close to catching sight of her. She watched hopefully for several more minutes, yet as quickly as Selku had almost appeared, she vanished. Becoming lost in her thoughts, Asta returned her attention to her mother, straightening the bed sheets, arranging fresh flowers for the bedside table, and encouraging in vain her mother to sip some warming broth. How, she wondered, examining her mother's frail face, did Selku keep well, living in the forest, no matter how inclement the weather? To live in a forest independent of all others, she reckoned, you must know how to care for yourself well when illness comes upon you. Wearily placing down her mother's uneaten broth, Asta made a decision. She would seek Selku's counsel. That night, trusting the moonlight to guide her, she headed into the forest. With no desire to alarm this solitary woman, Asta trod gently, picking her way through the brambles and low-hanging branches until she saw, just ahead, firelight glinting through the trees. Crouching over her fire, Selku poured steaming broth into a roughly carved vessel. Rising from her haunches, she proffered a drink to Asta. Come, she commanded, with a gentleness surprising to her young guest. Sit, Selku continued, beckoning to a moss-covered tree stump close to the fire. Taking the broth, Asta perched on the stump as this woman with wizened hands and bark-like skin stoked the fire. Bring your mother to the fire. Selku spoke with authority, her voice clear and calm, leaving Asta in no doubt that she was in the presence of a woman with great wisdom. You know why I'm here? She asked. Selku nodded. I've been watching for many months now. Even the finest people from throughout the world have been able to find a cure. Sensing Selku's compassion, Asta felt safe to share her sorrow. What ails your mother is not curable by medicines or potions. Asta waited, unsure what to say. What did Selku mean? The ailment runs more deeply than that, continued Selku, diverting her focus from the fire to look for the first time fully into Asta's eyes, where the firelight magnified her fear. Selku reached for Asta's hand, placing it tenderly between her palms. Your mother is not just sick in her body. She has lost her connection with her true nature. How did this happen? Whispered Asta. It's easily done, replied Selku. Many people these days live in ways far removed from their purest natures. Most have forgotten the old ways when we rose with the sunrise and slept with the sunset, living in harmony with the turning of the seasons. As we loosen our tether to these natural rhythms of life, we're sapped dry, left brittle and exhausted until, like your mother, we shatter and lose ourselves. I don't understand, said Asta. Mother has wanted for nothing. She's lived a life with many privileges denied to many. How has this made her sick? When did you last see your mother picking bluebells in this forest? Asked Selku. Asta's eyes turned to the fire, surprised by the question. She couldn't recall ever having seen her mother in these woods. When your mother was a small child, she would spend hours here. Sometimes she would forage. Other times she would run and dance amongst the trees. But what she loved most was to read peacefully under the shade of the trees. Asta, who'd only ever seen her mother dashing from one work meeting to another, couldn't imagine her sitting still long enough to read anything. But one day, continued Selku, she forgot to come, no doubt believing that something else was more important, probably one of those privileges you speak of. Stooping to prevent a branch rolling from the fire, Selku continued. The problem is, she continued to forget, until the day turned into a year, and the year turned into many years, by which time she had forgotten that the trees even existed. Worse still, she had forgotten how she once thrived amongst them. Selku stooped to retrieve a recently fallen fir cone from the forest floor. Holding it aloft, she watched as moonlight bounced from each seed wing. These privileges that you talk of might be considered false privileges, enslaving people to ways of being that don't nourish them, causing them to wither like flowers deprived of water on a summer's day, to forget all of who they are, of things that truly nourish them. Selku gifted the fir cone to Asta, earnestly, placing it in her hands as if it were a precious piece of gold. Asta's heart pounded, her breath frozen. Is there no hope for my mother? She hardly dare ask the question, but knew she must. It was, after all, her sole reason for being here. Your mother has been brought to a crossroads in her life where she must choose whether to live the life of her most natural self, honouring all of who she was born to be. Selku paused. Or to live a life where her deepest desires and gifts remain ignored. Asta cast her thoughts back to the vision of her mother lying in her bed as she had left her earlier this evening, realising that her mother was far away from the girl Selku described, reading peacefully amongst the trees. No medicine will heal your mother, nor physician. There is only one person who can heal her. Asta couldn't imagine who this might be. If no doctor could cure her mother, who could? Your mother must become her own healer. She must learn to gently listen to the deepest beats of her heart, to the rustle of her dreams as they sweep through her soul. Most importantly, she must release all that no longer serves her, so that she can welcome in a life of truth beyond anything she has ever known. It takes strength and courage to do this, but your mother has both of these qualities in abundance. But she is so weak right now. There is great strength in weakness. It is when we are at our weakness that our strength is tested. It is when we are tested that we discover how capable we truly are. Once we know this, we become truly free. Asta wondered how Selku knew this, yet sensed it wasn't time to question her. She kept her focus on her mother. How can she do this? She has already begun. The moment she shattered, her healing began. I don't understand. She's been ill for many months with no sign of improvement. How old do you think these trees are? Asked Selku. 50 years old, guessed Asta. In truth, she had no idea. She'd never thought about the ways of the forest, even though she'd grown up with the sweet pinewood aromas drifting through her window on a gentle summer breeze. Selku shook her head. The youngest is about 200, whilst the eldest is closer to 500, if not more. Sometimes, if something is to truly grow into the fullest expression of itself, much time is needed. Even that tiny fir cone has taken 3 years to mature. Asta glanced down in wonder, seeing the fir cone with its many seeds in a whole new light. When a person has spent years rushing blindly through their life, often hiding from truths or burying precious parts of themselves, or when life has become brutal with too many burdens to bear, we crash into ourselves, causing immense injury. These injuries have often built up innocently over a lifetime. Deep rest becomes vital. There should be no rush. This particular healing journey is not a quick dash and must never be forced into becoming one. Accepting this is the first and most important step. This is when the first test of courage is taken. The test of honouring the exhaustion, terror and fear, accepting the overwhelm and confusion. It's only by allowing oneself to sink into these states of vulnerability in their entirety that healing can come forward. In the grand scheme of things, a few months is nothing. This is deep healing that is taking place. It requires and deserves immense patience and deep trust. My mother is doing what she needs to do? Asta was beginning to understand. Yes, replied Selku with a reassuring smile. She is doing exactly what she needs to do. I feel so helpless. Is there nothing I can do to help her? Asked Asta. As I said, bring her here. With the fire and the trees, I will teach her how to reconnect with her natural ways of healing. But she can't walk. It will be impossible. Asta, seeking support in her anguish, gripped the fir cone. She doesn't have to come here physically. Tell her of your visit with me, of the forest and the fire. Ask her to imagine that she is under this tree where, long ago, she once played freely. She will remember. Then tell her, when she is ready to meet with me, to whisper the words, I am ready. I will hear them, and I will come. Then, together, we will begin. Still clutching the fir cone, Asta left the forest, full of doubt, yet she knew she had no choice but to trust Selku. Visiting her had been her last hope. If this failed, surely her mother would die. The next night, enveloped in the gentle warmth of the fire burning in the hearth at the foot of the bed, Asta tenderly stroked her mother's brow and recounted her encounter with Selku. She knows that you are too weak to return to the forest, Mother. She asks you to cast your mind back to your favourite tree, where you once sat, peacefully reading. Her mother showed no sign of understanding. Asta continued, desperate to reignite her mother's buried memories. Recalling the fir cone, she yanked it from her skirt pocket. Can you recall the forest trees you loved so deeply and the sound of the breeze through the leaves? She raised the cone to her mother's face, hovering near her nose, hoping the fragrance might dislodge the slightest memory. Remember the earth, Mother, its dank smell under each step, and the soft moss that cushioned the bark you sat upon. Take time to remember, Mother. It's all within you, waiting for you to return. Still, her mother lay heavy on the bed. Asta made one last desperate plea. She says you are strong, Mother, that only the strongest allow themselves to feel this weak. Did you hear that, Mother? You aren't weak. You're strong. Selku is waiting for you, Mother. All you need to say silently within yourself is, I am ready, and she will come. Asta sat in an uneasy stillness, unclear if her words had crossed the divide between life and death surrounding her mother. There was nothing else she could do. Her visit to Selku had been her last hope. As dusk turned to night, the rhythmic crackling of the fire lulled her into exhausted sleep. Cold darkness filled the room as the fire died out. Mother and daughter slept, neither knowing what the morning would bring. Asta was awoken the next morning by a gentle song coming from the direction of her mother's bed. Selku, perched on the soft eider down, was braiding her still sleeping mother's hair with sprigs of lavender and spruce leaves. The room was filled with sweet fragrance. A blazing fire crackled in the hearth. Selku indicated for her to join her on her mother's bed. You came, whispered Asta, knowing this could mean only one thing. Yes, nodded Selku. So she, choked by tears that Asta was unable to speak. Selku understood. It took several hours, but eventually your mother was able to see her old favourite tree and recall her many happy days sitting with her in her peace there. She was able to remember the forest and the trees, the fires and the rivers. She was able to remember the nights spent watching the moonlight from this very room. And she was able to remember the time when she still connected to the most sacred parts of herself. It was then that I knew she was ready. Reaching into a pouch hanging from her waist, Selku retrieved a small vial. Carefully uncorking the bottle, she dabbed a potion onto her mother's wrist that smelt of the forest, fresh after a heavy rainfall. What happens now? Although Asta was delighted by Selku's words, she couldn't help noticing that her mother remained in her deep slumber with 2 anxious furrows on her brows. There was no sign of her returning to life. Now we are ready to begin, said Selku. But remember, my child, the need for patience. It is from the womb of patience that the most magnificent new lives can be born. It is in this womb of healing that we can hear the whisper of our deepest truths, calling us back to ourselves, so that we can discover the steps that will lead us back to where we were born to be and who we were born to be, naturally. The story represents 3 parts of ourselves. The mother represents the part of you that is suffering from the breakdown. The daughter represents the part of you that wishes to find the healing pathway. And Selku represents your inner healer, that part of you that knows how to heal yourself. To begin with, even if you I've messed that bit up, but the part of you that knows how to heal yourself. And the fire represents your natural life force, the human spirit that knows how to fight and overcome adversity. The trees represent nourishment, care, support, boundaries. The mother in the story became ready to take her next steps towards healing, and so have you. So that's the first part in the story that I'm writing or have written, called The Truth Whisperer. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and I hope it's really resonated with you. If you would like to find out more about my work, I'm going to invite you to visit my new website, which is the link is www.karenpackwood.com, and there'll be the link in the discussion box below. But if you would like to share anything in relation to the story that you've just heard, how it's impacted on you, how it's resonated with you, if you'd like to ask anything about it, please leave comments in the box below. And of course, know that you're still welcome to email me at karenpackwood@gmail.com. It's kind of that story, even just reading that story has kind of, you can see that I've kind of, I've not got straight back into my flow of how I normally end my videos, because even reading that story, I mean, of course that story really comes from, my own personal journey with recovery and where I was in the early stages of my recovery. So even reading it has kind of triggered some emotions in me, which is, you can kind of sort of see as with how I've kind of come out of that story myself. So please know that you can. Please leave comments in the box below. Please write to me. Please visit my website. It's the beginning of the website. There's lots of information on it already, but there's going to be more over coming weeks and months. And I really hope that it's going to be a helpful resource for you. So that's www.karenpackwood.com. I'm not going to give you a message from the wilderness writing task today. I just want you to really connect with the story, and if anything, maybe just a journal on how the story that you've just listened to has impacted on you. What emotions has it made you think about? What resonance has it had with you? Maybe just do a little bit of journaling on that. But there'll be a new task for you to help you with your recovery journey next week. So this is Karen Packwood. This is the Spirit Spa, an online sanctuary dedicated to supporting you if you're in the early stages of recovery from a nervous breakdown, so that you can identify why the breakdown has happened to you and work out your next natural steps towards recovery. And I'm wishing you a very loving and peaceful day, and I'm hoping that it's not going to be disturbed by aeroplanes as this recording has been. I hope it hasn't disturbed the recording too much. But I can hear that there's one coming over right now. So yeah, I'm wishing you a very peaceful day, and I'm sending you lots of love. Take care. Bye-bye.